Zipper rolls out to the right, pitches off to Taylor, and Taylor's to the 20, down to the 15, down to the 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Billy Taylor scored a touchdown from 21 yards out. The crowd goes berserk. It was November 22nd, 1969. That they came to Barry, Michigan, all dressed in maize and blue. The words were said, the prayers were read, and everybody cried. But when they closed the coffin, there was someone else inside. Oh, they came to Barry, Michigan, but Michigan wasn't dead. And when the game was over, it was someone else instead. 11 Michigan Wolverines put on the gloves of gray, and as the organ played the victors, they laid Woody Hayes away. Under center is Wangler at the 45. He goes back. He's looking for a receiver. He throws downfield to Carter. Who's got it better than us? Nobody!
Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Our game day guest this week is Nick Baumgardner from the Athletic Detroit. A reminder to rate or comment on this program wherever you get your podcast from. I'd also like to hear any of your Maize and Blue thoughts about this season, good and bad. Email me at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. So before Nick joins us, let's get it started with my view from Section 17 as we do every week during the season. Well, the defense was outstanding on Saturday. I think we'll all agree with that. I kept waiting for them to break, and I wouldn't have blamed them. They were on the field all day. I thought all along defense was not going to be a problem for us. I mean, yeah, they got handled by Wisconsin, but I have a lot of faith in Don Brown, and I knew he would get things back on track. Now, watching our offense on Saturday, that was another story. It was so painful. As hard as it is for me to say this, I think it's true. The offense at this point of the season is what it is for the most part. We are at the midway point of the season, and I wish the offense would morph into this speed in space attack we were expecting, but highly unlikely that's going to happen. Jim had the best of intentions when he brought Josh Gaddis in as a new OC, but for whatever reason, the install of this offense is just going to take longer than anyone ever thought. We're going to have to find a few things the offense can run well and run them, and maybe add to that week by week. And you know the staff knows that by now, and they're working on it. But I'm worried about the confidence of Shea Patterson and the offense as a unit. Now, I know people are laughing at Jim for his post-game comments, saying the offense was hitting its stride. He repeated it again Monday at his presser. He knows what he's doing. He has to let his team know he believes in them. And I know he does, and who knows, Jim might be right in some small way that the offense might be getting better in practice. It just has to start translating to Saturdays, and quickly. My guest today says the only thing he can say about this new offense is the installation has just not worked for whatever reason. Nick Baumgardner from the Athletic Detroit joins me next here on The Michigan Man, in partnership with our friends at SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Here with us on our game day segment to take a look back at the Iowa game Saturday and just a wee bit ahead to Illinois. Nick Baumgardner from the Athletic Detroit. Great to have you back again, Nick.
No problem, Mike. Glad to be here.
Well, let's start with the positives from Saturday's 10-3 win over Iowa, Nick. And I think a lot of fans are struggling to see some positives, but that defense, Jim Harbaugh called it a masterpiece. I'm not sure if that's what it was, but it was a very impressive effort, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, full disclosure, I was actually at the Michigan State-Ohio State game, so I had to catch this. I caught the second half live, and I've rewatched it since. But when I'm listening to it, because it's funny, because I got the weird, it's different for me because I'm usually at the game.
Yeah.
But I'm listening to the first half on the radio, right? So I'm listening to them getting stop after stop after stop, and I'm like, well, maybe Iowa's just struggling, or maybe it's them playing really well. Then I turned on the second half, and Iowa was certainly struggling, but Michigan was taking it to them. They had no answer. It was a really good game plan, I think, with the blitz packages that they put together, the pressure they showed. There was some zone we saw out there, too, in coverage. I mean, they mixed some things up and really became something that was very difficult, it seemed like, for Nate Stanley to read, and then the offensive line had no answer for anything up front. Michael Dwumfor being back seemed to help a lot. It's back in what looks like good health anyway, seemed to help a lot. The defensive ends were terrific, all the way down to Michael Dano, of course, coming in after Kwity Paye had gotten banged up there. But, great stuff from the front seven. And, Mike, I have 100 podcasts now. I don't know if you know. I podcast like 4 times a week. But every one of those last week I said, this is an answer the bell game for both sides of the ball, and kind of where I thought it was. Defensively, I said for the front seven. You have to show how much progress you've made since the Wisconsin game, because Iowa, albeit not as good as Wisconsin, Iowa, if you let them, will pound the ball on you and will bully you up and kind of embarrass you, and that didn't happen. I mean, they had 1 yard. Cameron McGrone looks like an answer in the middle there, of course, and the whole front seven, I thought, from 2 weeks ago, I can buy that maybe that was a little bit more of an aberration than what we saw, right? Because I think that they proved that they're better than that, and that's a big step for Michigan.
Well, that defensive line is still a concern for me. I'm just going game by game on this, and you're right. Hopefully the Wisconsin game was an aberration, but the depth, I know that's something that still concerns a lot of us. But these guys were really getting off blocks well on Saturday against a very big and a very good Iowa offensive line. So, and the good thing to me was they got contributions from a lot of guys, Nick.
Yeah, they got a lot of guys in there. They got a lot of guys some time. And you're right, they got off blocks. They looked like they had more energy. They looked like they were more in tune with what they were doing. They were just getting caved in at Wisconsin. I mean, there was no it wasn't scheme or effort or whatever, I guess. Maybe it was. I don't know. It was just a team that was getting caved in, by an offensive line that was just completely dominant. And Iowa's offensive line, again, not as good, but still not bad in terms of run blocking. And they were getting off blocks. I thought Terrell Kemp looked better. Aiden Hutchinson continues to improve. Kwity Paye, of course, before he got hurt, was much better than he was 2 weeks ago. Same thing with Michael Dana, and so on down the list. I mean, it's not a perfect front, of course. You don't have, it's the same thing. When you lose Devin Bush, it can be a jarring thing because he was, as good as any player I've seen since I've been covering Michigan. And when you take him out of the middle there, it changes a lot. And, they've had to adjust to that. And, I think that steadily they have. This isn't the best offense you're going to see all season, of course, in Iowa, but you've made them look really bad. And, that for a good defense, that's the best you can hope for. So, and more than that, when your offense is that bad and putting you in horrifying situations over and over and over again, pretty solid defenses, even good defenses, are going to crack. There's going to be something in the second half where they let one slip. And Michigan did. They actually had the play in the end zone where the tight end got loose and they got a holding call, but that was about it. And I think that guy dropped the ball anyway. But, I mean, that was about all I could see in the second half in terms of, well, you got lucky there. You got out of – I mean, other than that, it was just they just dominated the game. So super impressive mentally to hang in there like that and make sure that game ended the way it did.
When you mentioned missing Devin Bush, that is huge this year. We know that. But some of the young talent on defense starting to contribute and impress.
Yeah.
Starting with Cam McGrone, who you mentioned, he flies all over the field. He looks like a player, doesn't he, Nick?
Yes, he does. He looks like he's playing up to his he looks like he knows what he's doing now. And I think that's got to be the biggest thing because Cameron McGrone was a really good athlete in high school. He was a 5-star recruit in some ranking classes or whatever you want to call it. In some, he was a 4-star, but he was one of the top linebackers in the class. He was a guy that they thought would come in and contribute pretty early. And of course, now you're seeing that. But I think that last year, it seemed that it was a super adjustment for him in terms of, understanding what you're doing and maybe where to go, which is natural. And then I think they said that somewhere along the lines at fall camp this year, they started to see a guy who played with his instincts again and kind of understood his place in the defense. And now you can kind of see, a lot of times it's just read and react. And, a lot of stuff they use with him with pressure, he's closing the ground pretty quickly. He understands what he's trying to do. I mean, you hate to see it for somebody like Josh Ross, but, he got hurt, and that's why Cameron Grone's in the game. Boy, I got to tell you, I don't think that Cameron Grone's coming out when Josh Ross gets back. I don't know how you do that. I think that maybe you figure out a way to get Josh Ross some time somewhere else because they think he's a good player. McGrone's reps have to be there because he's been really good. He was even good at times in the Wisconsin game. He was maybe the only guy you could go back and look and say, there was a couple plays in a losing effort where he was the guy. If he was making a mistake, he was making it 150 miles an hour. That was what you wanted to see in that game. Maybe if you're looking for any scrap of anything hopeful. And now it looks like he's really coming into, being a guy who understands his job.
And Dax Hill, true freshman, starting to get more minutes. The fans have been clamoring to see Dax since opening night. Pretty obvious to even the average fan, I think, Nick, that this kid is really special, and he just looks like the real deal out there, doesn't he? He's ready to go.
Yeah, he closes a lot of ground really fast. He understood coverage concepts in high school as a player at a higher level than most did, and that speed that he has for his ability to close down. And he made a tackle that most people probably won't notice or care about, but he made a tackle in I think it was the first half of the Iowa game where it was a play that ended up being like a 3-yard gain, but I mean he came from his high safety spot all the way down and closed like 12 yards and made what probably should have been like a 9 or 10-yard gain, a 3-yard gain. And, stuff like that, it's always impressive. But, yeah, I mean, he made a nice play on the ball that led to an interception on a tip. And you just look at him, he just covers so much ground to where when you have guys that are that fast, like I said, I think his football IQ is higher than most at his age. But when you have a guy that's that fast, it's like Devin. I always go back to Devin Bush. I mean, Devin was such a smart player anyway, but when he did make a mistake, you didn't notice it because he could wipe it out because he's so quick. And I think that there's some of that with Daxton Hill, and that even if he is going the wrong way or something, I think he can come back on it, without much problem because he's so fast. And I don't think that's the issue. I think he knows what he's doing. He seems to be a good fit there at the nickel spot and some of the safety reps that he's getting to. So another guy that probably needs to continue to play more and probably will play more as they go forward here. And that's Michigan's defense right now. Speed. They're not a big defense. They lost a lot of size, a lot of big speed, so to speak, and so they got to combat everything with more speed on their own because they do have a lot of it in a lot of areas on the field. So we saw it certainly on Saturday. Nate Stanley's not the fastest quarterback you're going to see anywhere, but he had nowhere to go, and 8 sacks is 8 sacks.
Well, and thank goodness for that defense because the offense, if you sat through it, we knew was absent. The post-game presser, though, Jim said he thought the offense was hitting its stride. And I rewound that a couple of times just to watch the look on his face as he was saying that. I'm not even sure why he would say something like that, but clearly there is something really, really missing with this offense right now. And I don't know if anyone can figure it out.
Yeah, I wasn't there, of course, to listen to that, but I heard it after the fact. And it seemed like it was one of those, somebody asked a question about, what does this offense have to do to hit its stride? And then he took the word stride, and then he does that sometimes and turned it into, I don't know. I mean, I can't imagine you watch that game afterward and behind closed doors and sit there and think, boy, we're really close, guys, because, they have a lot of problems. And this game, number one, was the quarterback. He's not seeing anything, and when he is, he's not making throws. And part of that is on coaching, and part of that is on him. He's a senior quarterback. He's got to be better than that. There are times where I watch them play, and I say, he doesn't know where he's going with the ball, and I look at it and I say, well, that's because the install's just been poor. Maybe he just hasn't been taught, the concept the way he needs to be taught yet. and it's still coming along. And then there are times where I see him, like the interception he threw in the first half, which is just inexcusable for any quarterback at any level. I mean, he makes a throw, they run the high-low thing into zone coverage, and the low read is completely open like it's supposed to be, and he tries to throw it over the top into the tighter window and gets it picked. I mean, that's something you see from a freshman or a sophomore quarterback playing for the first time. That's not a guy who started multiple games and it was an efficient player last year. A guy who didn't do that last year. And so there's been serious regression at that position for whatever reason. And it just hasn't. And I think it's a factor of all. I think it's a new staff that hasn't done a very good job of installing or at least hammering down details on what they want done. And it's a quarterback who's just not comfortable. I mean, anytime anybody plays zone against Shea Patterson, it's a struggle for him. I mean, it's hard for him to see what he's supposed to be looking at, and there are times where Michigan doesn't counter that very well. But then I go back and I look too, and it's like you look across the board and you say, well, he's struggling, but the rest of this offense is still sort of unsure what it's supposed to be doing half the time. I mean, you see a play on near the goal line where it was goal to go, I think, early in the game, where he misses a wheel route that was open in the end zone. But I think maybe it was different I'm thinking of. But anyway, Nico Collins gets yelled at by Gaddis for having the wrong route depth. And it's like, is that just a mental error on Nico Collins, or is that you didn't tell him where to go? I mean, I don't know. I mean, so it's a really weird situation where it's no one really seems sure what's supposed to be happening. And it's game 6 now. You're about to be in game 6. The odds of this offense becoming anything resembling explosive seem long at best, and I suppose your best hope would just be to find efficiency somewhere, however you can find it. And what that means, I don't know. I don't know what the answer to that is.
No, I don't know either, but when you watch Shea Patterson on Saturday, what I'm starting to notice and worry about is his confidence starting to wane a little bit, because when you watched him after the play, you would see hands on hip, looking over at the sidelines, and you're thinking he was doing it quite often on Saturday. He does look very unsure of himself. I know this would be a big decision on Jim's part. Do you think they might be considering trying something else just to get him off the field for a while?
McCaffrey's been hurt, so I mean, it depends on maybe his concussion, if he's cleared with the brain injury to come back and practice or play. So I got to think that's probably a factor here as well. But the way I kind of look at it is, I remember, and you hate to say, this is sort of like what the situation they were in with. I don't think it's as bad, but it's close to what it was in 2017, where you have a quarterback who's just not. It's not working. I mean, it hasn't lost you a game, but I mean, if you get into a situation now where quarterback, I think going forward, if you get into a spot where quarterback play is costing you drives and possibly costing you the game, then you got to do something. I mean, if it doesn't continue to move forward, I mean, we saw that in 2017 where Harbaugh stuck with John O'Korn through that Indiana game where O'Korn was like 5 of 20, and it was just that was worse than anything Shea did on Saturday. But it was one of those where they got out of it, they survived, and then they got destroyed at Penn State, and then he was still struggling against Rutgers, and it was like, all right, now it's okay. And then Brandon Peters comes in and something different, and they get out of it and they move on. But that to me is kind of where it's at now, where it's like, if you're in a situation where the quarterback play is directly resulting in you not being ahead on the scoreboard, or you're struggling to win the game, then I think you have to at least consider it, because one more loss and this thing's over anyway. I mean, in terms of a Big Ten race, and then you'd really have to consider it, because what are you doing at that point? Because if your senior quarterback's play is bad and is not improving, the only reason he stays in the game is if the guys behind him are worse, and that would be a more alarming situation, and that would be another thing where we'd point to the coaching staff and say, what are you doing? What are you doing with these guys behind closed doors? Why are they not understanding what they're supposed to be doing out on the field? I mean, this is still college football, and I still keep that super high on my list when I look at these things, especially with the quarterback. You don't find many players in college football that aren't out there doing everything they can. I mean, they're trying, and you can see it from Shea. Mike, you said it. He looks frustrated. He looks like his confidence is lacking, and it's not from lack of caring. I mean, it seems like he's trying. He's doing everything he can. And he's obviously frustrated with it. when that happens, I look at the coaching staff and I say, what are you doing to get this guy out of this? You can't just say every guy doesn't have it, because eventually you're the one who doesn't have it. And so that's what I look at it with the coaching staff right now, because this is like the fourth quarterback this has happened to, or the third, where you look at him and you say, what happened to this guy? And, you wonder where that all comes from. And now it's like, it's become like a theme. And it's like, this is now it's on the coaching staff. And I still put it there at their feet, and they've got to figure it out, because, they're the reason this is going on, and they're the only way that it gets fixed.
Well, let's talk about the next mystery, at least to me, on this offense, and that's the offensive line. I mean, they were okay in pass blocking. Shea had plenty of time on Saturday, I thought, for the most part.
Yeah.
But 5 games into the season, the question to a lot of us, Nick, is with basically the same offensive line returning from last year. Okay, you have Jalen Mayfield on the right side, and you've got Ed Warner back coaching them, who got a lot of credit for bringing them along and making them better last year, and they're struggling. It just doesn't make sense to me, Nick.
No, and, again, it's I think it's compounded into a complicated situation where you started the season with an offensive coordinator that wanted to run things that were different from what this offensive line executed last year, and they struggled with it. And, they had new tackles rotating in and all this, and new backs, and it just hasn't looked. And so they've had to scrap down some of that and kind of go back to the foundation of what they were good at last year to a degree, but it also really brings them. I mean, you can't run much, because the only things that the things that they ran well last year, the split zone, the inside zone, the outside zone, that sort of thing. A lot of that was predicated on the outside zone in a way, was predicated on a running back who was a veteran who understood that concept really well and made good reads. And now you have younger backs who are running hard and trying, but their reads are not going to be as clean, so they're not going to make it look as easy sometimes. And then when you're trying to run gap stuff that doesn't work, you got to take that off the play sheet. The pin pull stuff that they're running doesn't work, you got to take that off the play sheet. Now you look around and you say, well, you only got like 2 or 3 things you can do, and Iowa knows it. And there you go. And that's why I think you end up in those situations. When I've looked back at it, last week when they played Rutgers, I haven't gone all the way through twice and looked at it deeper here, but they struggle with the things that they've proven that they're going to struggle with, that Michigan continues to run anyway. And when they're running the stuff that we know they can execute, they execute it. So, it's one of those things where, I go all the way back to August 1st, 5th, whatever, when you start camp. What were you doing in August? And that's what I go back to with this offense. The install of this offense was bad. There's nothing else to say at this point. They can come out every week and say it's execution. We got to execute. We got to stop fumbling. All true. You have to coach better, because that offense isn't good at one concept, and you've had 6 weeks. There's not one or two. There's not one thing, let alone 2 or 3, where we can look at and say, well, at least they have that. They're going to get out of this game because they're going to get up. They're going to line up in 12, and they're going to run the G scheme, and they're going to get out of this game. They're going to do things that we know they can execute, and they're going to get out of this game. They don't have any of that. So that's on the coordinator, and that's on Harbaugh, and that's on the staff, because they didn't install it right, and or not well enough anyway. And again, that's being honest with yourself here now, 6 weeks in, and if you're not going to be honest with yourself, and it's just going to continue. If you think that you're hitting your stride, okay, well, we'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
And maybe, I guess we could be proven wrong, right? We're not experts. It certainly doesn't look like it right now.
No, and you get to this point, Nick, where we are almost midway in the season, and Jim and Gaddis and the offensive staff, if we see it, they see it, and they've got to try something.
Sure.
I'm sure, they don't know what it is, or they would have started fixing it already, but one thing is sure, the offense has got to be better soon, even if it's incrementally. Or, when I look at this schedule and look at some of the teams on that schedule, I think, another 4 losses are very possible.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think that's what this team looks like. It's going to have to work hard to get to 9-3. I mean, they look like they're going to have to really strain to get to that 9-win mark in the regular season. And anything beyond that would be, quite the turnaround, because they're not headed in that direction, and neither is Iowa. And that was the whole takeaway from that game was, 2 teams that were ranked in the top 20 that don't appear to be headed toward the top end of the top 20. I mean, it just doesn't look that way from either side. And, there's still obviously time to turn that around, but it's like you look at that performance offensively and you say, that's not going to hold up on the road against anybody. So you're going to go to Penn State in a couple weeks. You play like that on the road there, you're going to get run off the field. It's certainly not going to hold up against Ohio State. No chance. And if you're going to play like that against Ohio State, I don't care where you play it. Same thing with Notre Dame. And then Michigan State is a flawed team, but they have enough defensively to beat you if you're going to just do that on offense. If you're going to play in a game where your quarterback, if you take out the 50-yard throw that he had or 60-yard throw that he had, I mean, he's averaging like four yards an attempt. If you're going to play like that against a team like Michigan State, you're going to lose that game too. So there's plenty of games on the schedule left, more than the easy ones, right? There's plenty of harder ones than there are the easy ones. So, I'm not sure what the answer is, but I got to think at this point, all options have to be explored, and that includes the quarterback. And I think that would only be fair. I think that there's nothing left to say in terms of, why are you not looking at this, because there's no reason to. I would think everything would have to be probably explored at some level.
Well, as I said, it looks like another 3 or 4 losses could be on the horizon if we don't get this fixed, but one of them should not be this weekend down in Champaign-Urbana.
Yeah.
The Fighting Illini might not be as bad as Rutgers, but they're just not a good football team at all, are they, Nick?
Yeah, they're not as bad as Rutgers, because in that I don't think they're hopeless like that. But no, they pushed Nebraska hard a couple weeks ago at home, but I think Nebraska's kind of proven to be not good. It's probably the best way we could put that. So, no, I mean, Brandon Peters, obviously, in the former Michigan quarterbacks, the guy there, that'll be something people talk about this week. I think Brandon's had a couple games where he's been pretty good and a couple games where it hasn't gone very well. But, again, Illinois, no. I mean, they've got a lot of transfers on that team in general. Brandon's not the only one. They've got a lot of them that have come through there with Lovie Smith as he's trying to get it going. Certainly a team that Michigan has a talent advantage over. A team that's not very good anyway, but also a team that's playing at home, and one that's probably, this is one of those games where if you're Illinois and you're trying to get yourself out of the trash can, this is the time to do it, because you got a name opponent coming in. Michigan's ranked 15th or whatever, and it'll be all guns blazing. I mean, this team really feels like the 2013 Brady Hoke team that started out like 6-0. Remember that team? They were 5-0 or 6-0 or something like that, and then they lost to Penn State and the wheels fell off. This feels like that team where it wouldn't take much to. Their confidence is just on. It's super thin, and that's what I'm talking about when I say that. And that so it wouldn't take much for them to find themselves in a hole and playing suddenly poorly, much worse than they probably are capable of. So if you're Michigan, you have to come out really prepared and ready to play, because Illinois is not good, but it's a road game, and stranger things have happened. So they've got to be locked in, because I don't think there's anything left on the schedule that I would say is just an all automatic gimme for this team the way they played offense.
No, very concerning. Well, aside from Michigan, I watched the Ohio State-Michigan State game on Saturday night when I got back, and I know you were down there. Spartans had that great first quarter, and then Ohio State just exploded. And from there on out, they just look scary, don't they, Nick?
Oh, yeah. They've got Justin Fields. I said to somebody at the game, I said, boy, by the middle of next year, because you got to remember, this is only like his 6th game as a football player, college football player, or 5th or whatever. By the middle of like next year, this guy's going to be undefensive. I mean, I don't know how you guard him. I mean, there's so much he does. He's got such a good arm. He's really accurate when he sees and makes the right read. He's obviously fast. He's big. I mean, that's the thing, too, where it sneaks up on you when you see him in person, how big the guy is. And how he can run over and around people. J.K. Dobbins looks like the star that we thought he would turn into when he started at Ohio State. The offensive line's blocking well. The receivers are everywhere. And then their defense is more organized, of course, with Greg Madison and the new staff they have over there as well. So all that talent is playing with confidence, and when that happens, look out. And Michigan State is, in a situation where I actually thought, for stretches of that game, I mean, they had some mistakes, but they had some of their best drives of the season offensively, and Brian Lewerke's playing as well as he has all year, and they still weren't even close. So I think that, well, when I look at that, I look at two things. Ohio State's super talented, and is just kind of motoring through people without much resistance. And Michigan State is limited. I think that's the best way I can put that. They don't have a lot of easy answers to get out of problems. They have to really play perfect on offense for that thing to work. Defensively, they're still really good, as we saw at times, and then the times where they got off kilter there. But they have the potential to be really good. Offensively, they're they're limited. They don't have a lot of get out of jail free cards on offense. So it's easy to see where that goes south pretty quickly. But yeah, Ohio State clearly the best team in the league, not even close. I can't see anybody right now. Maybe Penn State, maybe Wisconsin, but I guess we'll have to see about that.
Well, it's going to be an interesting stretch run, and you're right. Penn State might be the only team that can give them a game. Maybe Wisconsin. It's going to be interesting, though.
Mm-hmm.
Here with us on our Game Day segment as we took a look back at the defensive masterpiece, as Jim Harbaugh called it, against Iowa, Nick Baumgardner from the Athletic Detroit. Nick, always great to have you on the show, and we look forward in a couple of weeks to getting you back.
Absolutely, Mike. Not a problem.
Quick Hits is next as we wrap it up for another week here on The Michigan Man, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. On Quick Hits today, at his Monday presser, Jim said he had no updates on the health of Kwity Paye and Sean McCune. Dylan McCaffrey and Josh Ross are still out. Jim said Donovan Peoples-Jones is close to being 100%. We moved up to number 16 in the polls this week. Aiden Hutchinson was named the Big Ten Defensive Player of the Week after his outstanding performance on Saturday against Iowa. And next week, our trip to Happy Valley will be a night game. That was announced on Monday. Kickoff will be 7:30 p.m. on ABC against Penn State. Thanks again to our guest today, Nick Baumgardner from the Athletic Detroit. On Thursday's Visitors Edition, my guest will be the radio play-by-play voice of the Fighting Illini, Brian Barnhart. So make sure you join us for that. That does it for now. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Have a great Wolverine week, everyone. Until we meet again, take care, and as always, go blue. Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V-Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!